Welcome to Generation Inspired, exploring the people and ideas shaping tomorrow.
What if one of the biggest myths we've ever been told is that school is the best way for children to learn? Today's guest is Dr. Peter Gray. He's a psychologist, researcher, and author of the best-selling book Free to Learn. Now, for decades, Peter has studied how children actually learn when they're given something that most schools rarely allow, which is freedom. So that freedom to explore, to play, to follow their curiosity. And what this research shows is so fascinating. When young people are trusted to direct their own learning, they often become more motivated, capable, and resilient than we ever imagined. So, if we want a generation that can think for themselves, adapt to change, and solve real problems, maybe the real question isn't how we improve school. Maybe it's whether we need to rethink it altogether.
And as I said, a few of them had done all of their schooling there, and many of them had done all of their schooling since the age of about 12 there. So this was there were about close to 90 in that category at that time, even though the school was relatively small at that time. And that study is what changed my career, because it was so interesting to find here are young people, young adults who had grown up without what we think of as school, grown up with something extraordinarily different from school, where they were truly trusted to take charge of their own education, truly trusted, not nudged along the way, nobody coming and saying things like, well, don't you think it's time for you to learn to read now, and things like that. No, not the staff at the school deliberately stopped doing that. Some parents might try to do it, but it doesn't work very well, because the conflict between the message at home and the message at school. And so parents who keep their kids at the school learn to trust their kids for the most part, and stop trying to direct their kids' education. So the amazing thing is the the these young adults were living very satisfying adult lives. Those who wanted to go to college, and this was the biggest surprise to me, went to college. I couldn't find anybody who wanted to go to college who didn't. They all got into college if they wanted to. In one sense, in retrospect, that's not too surprising. In the United States, even though everybody worries about their kid getting into college, the truth of the matter is anybody can go to college. And the way you can do it is to go first to a community college, which will literally accept anybody. It's inexpensive. It's a 2-year college if you stay for the total. But you can go there and take courses, and they count as college courses. And so some kids did it by just going to a community college for to take a few courses, or maybe even to go for a year or two, and then they would transfer to a 4-year liberal arts college. But there were others, a fair number, who went directly to a 4-year college without ever having, including in a couple of cases, without ever having taken a course before they went to college, any kind of formal education course, never having taken a test, an academic test, until they took the SAT test. That is the the Scholastic Aptitude Test that some colleges require for admissions, and some of them went to a fairly elite college, took that test as a way of getting in. They prepared themselves for that test. It's not terribly hard to do if you really are motivated to do it. And so
It's
my
interesting,
concern
isn't
about
it?
going to college was set aside. They didn't seem to they went on to college at about the same high level as kids from this public school that my son had left.
Did you
And
research
this
the jobs that they were getting after college? Was there any difference in careers?
so that's a good question. Um, there were, I have to say, a slightly disproportionate number of kids in music and art. Not too
Of
surpri
course.
not too surprising. But amazingly, they were good enough that they were making pretty good living at it. One or two of them were
Wow.
actually rather famous. One
Amazing.
of them was quite a famous pop star at the time, and another was part of a major orchestra, a famous orchestra. Um, another was a leading theater director, and so they, when you really spend a lot of time on your music and art and whatever it is you're interested in, you get
Yeah,
good at it. It
absolutely.
turns out you can actually make a living at these things that most people have difficulty making a living at. But to my satisfaction, because although my son was interested in music and art, I don't think he was interested in that as a career at any point. But to my satisfaction, there were graduates in every realm that we regard as important in the culture. There were graduates who were in the service professions. In that particular group, there were no doctors. There was a couple of nurses, but a little bit later, there were some graduates who became doctors, graduates who became lawyers. There were many graduates who founded their own businesses, were
I was going to ask
successful.
that question because I feel
Why-
like a lot of kids that don't fit into traditional schooling are the future entrepreneurs, the business owners.
Yeah, yeah. So what you didn't find is, not surprisingly, they went into careers where they still have a lot of self-direction possibility,
Yes.
where they're kind of in charge, continue to be in charge of their own lives. So you didn't have people becoming kind of like middle managers in business, where you're sort of shuffling papers and a cog in a larger wheel. The ones who went into business either got into a small business where they could play a major role in running it, or more often founded their own business. Interestingly, one of the graduates in this study, and this, as I say, was a long time ago, this was at the time really when the home computer was just becoming available, was when I did this study. So you can see how long ago this was. So one of the students at the school, who was one of the who was one of the graduates that I interviewed, so he had been a student earlier than when I did this study, had, by his claim, been kicked out of public school, that he had consistently failed, he had been a total failure in school, and that he was expelled from public school. I'm not honestly sure if that's completely true or if it's just his way of saying it, because I'm not sure that it's legal to prevent somebody from going to public school.
Okay.
But at any rate, I believe him that he was a terrible student there. He came to Sudbury Valley. He was something like, I forget exactly what, 11 or 12 years old. But for whatever reason, he was really interested in computers. And the school at that time did not have any computers. And so one of the things that the school does is they have what they call corporations, which are really special interest groups. So kids who have a particular interest in something, that sort of like they form a club and they lobby with the school meeting to get equipment related to what they're interested in. So the sports corporation lobbies for, repaving the outside basketball court, or getting,
Yeah.
getting new bats or baseball or whatever it is that they want. The music corporation lobbies for a better soundproof room so people will stop complaining when they're playing their music loud.
Yeah.
So he started um, the computer corporation. So he got together, now the number of kids, he made himself president of the computer corporation. And then he, probably I imagine about 12 years old, began calling local computer companies in the Boston area and introducing himself as the president of the computer corporation of the Sudbury Valley School. And we're extraordinarily interested in your particular type of computer as a vehicle for learning for our students at our school. And we're wondering if you could donate us a computer. And he managed to collect 2 or 3 computers that way, and
Oh, I
he
love
figured out how to use them. So he was the one, a 12-year-old kid who brought the whole idea of computers, brought the school into the computer era.
wow.
Now, that kid went on, and by the time he graduated, he had been a software developer. He started a software company. He claims, so most of the students weren't making a lot of money, and I don't think that they had any particular goal in making money. And I don't know if this young person did or not, but he told me at this time, back when $1 million was actually a lot of money,
Yeah.
he said, my computer is over the $1 million mark now. My computer, my software company, and my biggest client, he said, is the school that kicked me out.
Oh my god. Like, oh my goodness, Peter, you
No,
say like
no, that's
so
just
many
one
things
story,
there.
of course. I could tell a lot of stories like that, and of course, it's just, one kid. This doesn't tell you what happens with everybody by any means, but it gives a sample of what can happen in this
Mm,
kind of a school.
I love that.
Kids discover what they're interested in. They get passionate about what they're interested in. They often become very good at it. And very frequently, they're able to find careers in which they're making a living doing what they love to do. And how lucky they are that they can do that compared to other kids who are spending all their time growing up doing what other people are telling them to do. And they don't really have the opportunity to really figure out who they are, what they're interested in, what their passions are, and then they just kind of blindly go on to college and choose some career, maybe because it sounds prestigious or
Mm.
somebody recommends it to them, but they aren't necessarily passionate about it. It's a very different life trajectory than the life trajectory of kids who are involved in self directed education. And that's really what I discovered even in that first study at the Sudbury Valley School. And it's an idea that has been, kind of motivated a lot of my work since.
Thanks for sharing that, Peter. I just want to start by saying I can imagine you had to really tap into, I guess, the side of you that needs to be brave, pulling your child out of a school. Because, I mean, I've been through that, and I know that you have conflict in your brain, like, oh, we'll just keep, pushing through it. Come on, you're going to build resilience if you can stay in the school. But realistically, there comes a point where happiness is just a lot more important, right? So well done
Right,
for being brave and being such an incredible parent to take that risk and that jump and that leap of faith.
right.
It sounds like you've just, wow, your son obviously has got so much from that style of learning. What would you say? Because I know there will be a lot of parents listening here that are in that situation where they keep hoping that things will get better. And they all see these other styles of learning. But as a parent, we don't want to make a mistake, do we? We're like, where is the biggest mistake here? Is it more of a mistake to leave them in traditional schooling, or do we just need to go and try something else?
Yeah, I think it takes for most people, it takes a lot of courage to do something, especially with your kids, that's different
Mm,
from what the majority of people are doing. Um, a later study that we did was a study of unschooling parents. And among other things, we asked them the question, what's the most difficult thing about unschooling for you? And, one might think, well, maybe, having my kids home all the time or having to live on one income, or if it's a single parent, having to deal with a job and my kids at home, you might think that was it. No, far and away, the biggest problem was overcoming their fears about the criticisms that they believed they were getting or really were getting from other people for doing this
wow.
thing with their kids, even maybe
Yes.
from the parents' own parents who think that these parents are just ruining the lives of grandchildren of that, "Well, how could you do this?" I mean, we have, in Australia, I'm sure, and certainly in the United States, we come from several generations of everybody going to school, of most
Yes.
people going to school, right? So we just believe that schooling is just part of growing up. You can't really grow up and go on and become an adult without going to school. How could you?
Mhm.
That's in everybody's head. A little less so now with change, but certainly, the time that wife and I were making this decision, that was pretty much in everybody's head. You have to go to school. We are creatures of norms. We for good bio evolutionary reasons, we tend to do what other people in our culture do. I mean,
Yeah.
If other people are doing it, that must be the right thing to do. Otherwise they wouldn't. Otherwise they'd be doing something else, right? And so, in many realms, this is true. So you don't want to just willy nilly act randomly. You want to behave kind of in the way other people do. Human society depends upon that. You
Mm.
know, everybody's just, at least in the United States, everybody's driving on the left side of the street. You don't want to just decide to drive on the right side of the street, right? So, this would just create chaos. It would ruin you. So, this is arcs of norms. And the norm is to send your child to school. And so, unless there's something about your set, your own courage as a parent, your own convictions that really overrides that, the temptation is to keep that kid in school as long as you possibly can, to fight the child, to think there's something wrong. You know, there's a category called school refusal. Now,
Yes.
my son might have been diagnosed with that, but it's treated as a psychological disorder. The way you deal with it is to take the kid to a psychologist who helps the child overcome this irrational fear, called
Wow.
school phobia. This is actually a diagnosis in the UK. There's been a lot written about this in the UK. And so so normal to go to school. It's regarded as abnormal. It's regarded as a problem with the child that the child has to overcome if the child refuses or doesn't want to go to school. So this is difficult. So I think the way that people overcome it, first of all, is to really number 1, at this point, it's easier to make the decision because there are studies, including mine, done that shows it works. It's not a big gamble. It works, at least as well as, the others as it does, if not better, depending on how you define as well or better. And the other that I think a lot of parents, would help a lot of parents is to realize this decision is not irreversible.
That's
You can
right.
take your child out of school and they can still go back to school. And there are a lot of people who take their child out for homeschooling or unschooling. And then for one reason or another, it's not usually the poor parents who make this decision. If it does, it's often a problem. But for one reason or another, the child decides they want to go back to school. And I've heard many examples of this. So the child maybe was taken out of school for homeschooling at, let's say, in third grade. And then in fifth grade, the child decides, or sixth grade, the child decides, my friends are going to school. I really want to see what school is like now. I'd like to go back to school. And in the majority of cases, the child goes back at whatever grade they would be at. And even haven't been studying the same subjects, they go back and they're not really behind.
Mm.
And the reason they're not really behind is nobody really remembers what they learned from one grade to the next anyway. This is
That is
just
so
true.
true.
This is just absolutely true. So the extreme case of this that I know of is a few who told me unschooling family. They told me they really didn't believe in school and they never sent their child to school. And then when the child was of the age to go to third grade, the child said, I want to go to school. And of course, if you're your child, you respect on this too. You listen to them. You say, okay, you can try it. Remember, you can always leave if you want. But in this case, the mom said to the child, well, in third grade, everything is about reading, and you don't know how to read. I don't see how you can go to third grade. They'll probably put you in first grade because you don't know how to read. And so he said, according to the mom's report, all right, I'll learn how to read. And so
Ah,
he took a couple of weeks, learned how to read, and went to school in third grade.
look
So
at that. That's
it
incredible.
turns out learning how to read isn't that difficult if you really want to do it. So it's not irreversible. There are a lot of families that I hear of, but the kids kind of go in and out of school. They go to school for a little while and then they get tired of school and they start homeschooling and they go again to school for another
Yeah.
couple of grades. There are
I
some
feel that's
kids
gonna make people feel
there's
better.
some kids who don't go to school until high school. And oftentimes the reason given for that is you know, I'm 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 not a lot of, people that I would like to date, here at
I wonder
homeschooling
that,
or
yeah, with the
at
teenagers.
this free school I'm going to. So I
Yeah.
really wanna be part of the social scene of high school, and I like the idea of a high school prom and all of that, and then there are a few who get very serious about some sports, and they wanna go to school so they can be on a real varsity sports team that
Mm.
plays formal games with other schools, not just the kind of pick up fun games that you would be doing at Sudbury Valley. So there's a variety of reasons people go, but they just go,
I
they
love
fit in.
that. It's so good
In
to
a way,
know
that's
just
no different from what I said about college.